Petscop, an old PlayStation game, and the name of a 25-part video series recorded by a kid named Paul, in which he explores this old video game that he found in his house, and slowly, bit by bit, he uncovers the strange, dark, twisted secrets hidden within the game, and reveals some of their real-world implications. Now, this game and this series contain mentions, hints, themes of some pretty dark stuff, namely that of child neglect, abuse, manipulation, and death, and potentially some things worse than that. You have been warned. So, Petscop starts off as a fairly unassuming Let's Play series. The game, as far as we can tell, looks quite light, quite fun, a little weird as most good PlayStation 1 games were, and after a chirpy little menu screen, the game starts off. Paul enters his name, and we enter what's called the gift plane. And Paul, upon spawning, examines this sign, and it reads, "The gift plane has closed indefinitely and all personnel have left." If you are unaware, the gift plane provided homes to over 100 young pets. Unfortunately, we have failed to remove all of the pets from their homes. 48 pets remain here at the time of writing. We would strongly encourage you to visit our 8 homes and find some friends to take with you. Every pet is uniquely valuable. You should have no problem finding somebody that you love. The gift plane staff. Which somebody that you love? I mean, you wouldn't normally call a pet somebody, so this is already some pretty strange wording right off the bat. Paul then shows us that even though the sign said there were at least originally 8 homes, there now seems to be just 1.
So, I'm just gonna show you the one and only level. This actually is not the interesting part, but I'm just gonna show you, I'm gonna walk you through all this so you can see that this is exactly what I described.
He comes across a picture of 2 friends, Toni and Randis, who are respectively a bird and a flower, and their names are color-coded red and green. And I'll just say now that color plays quite an important role in this mystery going forward, so just make sure you keep an eye out for that. He tries to open this nearby door, and it says, "This door is locked." Or not, but you don't know how to open doors. So yeah. The next room has some more of these signs, these notifications. When you're choosing a pet, find somebody that you like. You don't have to love them right away, and don't be discouraged if they run from you. They really do want a home. They're afraid. Show them that there's nothing to be afraid of. And there is that use of somebody again. Paul then proceeds to the next room where we see our first pet. This cannonball-looking creature with a hat, no less, who is named Amber. And Amber's seemingly trapped behind a cage, and there is a trophy in her room, on her shelf, that reads, "It's a trophy awarded to our Amber for being a real champ yesterday and today. She hasn't left her cage once." Which, I don't know, there's just something really off about that wording. Paul proceeds to open the left cage, and Amber jumps to the other one, seemingly not wanting to be caught or freed. Which I think harkens back to something we just read, don't be discouraged if they run from you. After a few attempts at catching Amber, Paul figures out that to catch her, he first needs to lock himself in one of these cages, and once Amber is convinced that he's also locked in there, she is happy to just jump over, and she is subsequently caught by Paul. Which he then proceeds to walk through this secret passageway and frees himself. So he was never really locked in there, and he essentially tricked Amber into thinking that he was, in order to maybe earn her trust and to actually capture her, which we'll touch more on that in a little bit. Paul then enters another room, Ronith's room, who is seemingly a combination of Tonith and Randis from the photo, but whenever Paul gets close, Ronith just flies up and away, and eventually Paul gives up. He then makes his way through the rest of the home, entering Pen's room.
So the second one here is sort of a music one. The idea here is you have to get your clone over there to overlap with it. I'll just cut to the chase. You just set this to, what is it? 7. And And just like that. I don't totally get that one. But that's that.
And then eventually Randus and Wavy's room.
Alright, so this one's kind of interesting. So the idea is if you run over here to catch the flower here, then you'll just get rained on.
And it should again be noted that Paul essentially captures these pets by tricking them. Yes, these are puzzles to be solved in a way, but they clearly try to get away from Paul to some extent, or to lock themselves away, as in Amber's case. But he does eventually capture these 3 remaining pets, and he captures Wavy by putting this bucket below him. And a bucket being obviously a Cloud's one and only natural predator means Wavy rains essentially into the bucket and is then captured.
And you can just catch them both that way.
And so, we are left with Ronith.
Okay.
But it is at this point that he tells us of this note that he found alongside the game.
Alright, so I still can't catch this guy. The reason we're here is because in the note that came with this, which is short, the first line in all capital letters, I'm gonna read it. It says, "I walked downstairs, and when I got to the bottom, instead of proceeding, I turned the right and became a shadow monster man." Below that, a date, June 13th, 1997. "For you, please go to my website on the sticker, and also go to Ronith's room, and press start, and press down, 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 right, start." So I happen to know that this is Ronith's room.
This note, it should be noted, can also be found in the description of this original video. But, having read it, it is incredibly cryptic.
Down, right, start. Alright? So you can see that it accepted it and the music stopped. I'm just gonna go out this way here.
And Paul then makes his way
So,
out of
It
Evencare.
appears to be the same, except when I actually leave here, it'll be a little bit different.
And what was once a void but fairly bright, fairly happy exterior is now a plain brick building in the middle of a vast field of sheer and utter darkness.
So there's nothing out here, as far as I've seen. But actually, I think there is something out here. I just haven't seen it yet. Because it sure seems like, in this note here, it sure seems like, right, I'm supposed to come out here and look at something. I haven't found anything yet, but I'm thinking if I just keep walking around here, I'm gonna find something eventually.
Now, let's try and recap what we just saw. This Evencare home seems to resemble a adoption center for pets. There are messages that we saw about finding one that you like, about taking good care of them, and there's even signs that the pets in question have perhaps faced some sort of abuse or have been treated badly in the past. With, notes like they're afraid, show them that there's nothing to be afraid of, and don't be discouraged if they run from you. And Amber's description in the pet menu says Amber is a young ball. She's afraid to leave her home. If her home is good, this is not a problem. She is very heavy and that makes her life a little harder, as well as yours. What's the safest place you can put her in? You should start thinking about that. Which, really sounds like a kid with extra needs, special needs, either mental, physical, psychological, etc. And they keep her locked in a cage and reward her with a trophy for never leaving. Which begs the question, what sort of game is this?
Hey, so I was talking about how I couldn't find anything out here. Well, I just found this. And, last time I came out here, I was walking around in this space here for over an hour. And this time I find this in less than 15 minutes. So, this is just luck that I happen to find this. And, I think if I were to restart my console right now, I would not be able to find this again. Probably, because I don't remember what I did. All the directions that I went. So I'm kind of scared to, I want to keep the console on until I figure this out. The situation is that I cannot open this door. I probably can open the door, but I don't know what to do. So I thought I would just slip this in at the end. If you think you saw something that might provide a clue, please let me know. Alright, that's it.
And that is how the very beginning of this strange dark mystery ended. But when it was released, nobody knew why the gift plane was changed into this void, or what it meant, or what it represented. And there was the ultimate question, I think, of what exactly was down underneath this plane. And none of these questions would be answered until the release of Petscop 2.
Hey, so, the door opened on its own. I was just in the other room for a couple of minutes, and I came back and the door was open, and I checked the recording, because I was recording, and the door just opens on its own. I didn't do anything. So, I'll take it, right? So I'm gonna show you what's in here now. I haven't seen it yet, so this could be interesting.
Paul enters the cellar and explores for a little bit, finding more of these little colourful points, which gives a very different feel to the scenes of collecting these same points earlier in the series. He finds what seems to be a furnace of some kind, going up into the ceiling, then explores the next room, and then from there, hears a phone ringing in the next room over. He picks up this phone and receives a message. Care left the room. And take note of how the name Care is in yellow.
What is this?
And on the poster are 3 different images of the face of the same girl, who you might have guessed is called Care. These images seem to go from completely fine to unsettled or distressed to seemingly downright broken, in tears covering her face. And beside the faces are the labels A, B, and NLM, which, at least for now, we are unsure what any of these labels means or stands for.
Okay.
Paul continues to explore this entire area, which honestly is surprisingly empty, except for these 3 pictures of what look to be a green house, a windmill, and a brick building of some kind that plays an ominous sound whenever we view it. There are a few areas or paths that don't seem to be finished, like this road he passes by, heads all the way up, collects some points, heads all the way down, but never really reaches a new area or transition or anything. So he heads onwards. He goes through a doorway or a hallway or a passageway, I guess, because there's no actual door here. And Paul doesn't even know how to open doors, so maybe that's a good thing.
Sorry for not talking very much. I'm a little bewildered, if you want to know the truth. This is a little more than I was expecting to see.
Paul then finds what seems to be a grave with a strange face on it that reads Michael Hammond, 1988 to 1995. Mike was a gift. And Paul says,
That's a dead kid. Yep.
Yeah. Next to the grave is a small building, also with a face on it, which, what's with the funny faces? And naturally, Paul goes inside. He finds this pretty flower and starts, pulling out or plucking the petals. One by one. And just as he's about to finish,
Wait.
He stops, heads down to the basement, and
Okay.
there he finds a familiar-looking figure. Care NLM from the poster. She seems to have something coming out of her head, and this seems to be the stalk of the daisy that we were plucking upstairs. So he goes back upstairs and plucks the remaining petals. He then goes downstairs to check on Care, and
Okay.
it doesn't seem like you can interact with her, but she is obviously disturbingly distorted, injured, shaking, and her face is no longer recognizable. Now, everything we've seen up to this point might be a little confusing, and it's hard to say how all of this is connected and what it all means. There's definitely themes of children, of adoption, perhaps of shy, damaged, or difficult children. There's a grave for one, Michael Hammond. There's a very distressed one who seemingly left the room and is now under a shed with a daisy coming out of her. And there is some info in the colors, in the dates, in the analogies, all of which will help us unravel this mystery moving forward.
I don't know. So when I first came down here, I thought I was just gonna see, like, one room. Like something, but not this. Can I go in here? I can.
Paul explores around a bit more and comes across a room with this strange red object in the middle of it.
Oh. What?
And clicking on the object pulls up a text box, which prompts Paul to ask a question. Now, who or what this question goes to, we're a little unsure of at this point, but Paul asks it hilariously just, "What?" And this object replies, "I don't know," which Paul finds a little funny. And, I mean, I guess that's a fairly reasonable answer to the question, "What?" But Paul then makes his way behind this object, and he is able to see a windmill in the middle of this field, just spinning menacingly. And if you'll recall, there was a picture of this very same windmill a little earlier in the episode. And just as Paul exits this view of the windmill, the object tells him to keep watching the windmill.
Oh. Alright, so it's been like 2 minutes, and when those sounds were playing, there was nothing happening as far as I could tell, and nothing has happened since, so I'm just gonna keep going. There's already been stuff that I could dig a little deeper into, and I'm gonna do that, and keep you updated. But also, when you come home next month, and hopefully you're feeling a little more enthusiastic about that now, we can investigate this together, and maybe you'll find stuff that I can't find here.
So, all this time, with Paul's use of the word "you," it's felt like he's talking to us. You know, his audience, his viewers. But we may have just learned a few things about Paul and his intended viewer, which I mentioned right at the start of this video, his friend. We learned that, at least for now, Paul will continue exploring, and he will keep his friend updated. We learned that this friend will be coming home next month, whatever that means exactly. And we learned that this friend, at least recently, hasn't been too enthusiastic about returning home. So, a bunch of info in just a few sentences. Paul continues to explore and finds a room. A pretty standard room. Bed, chair, bookcase, clock, backwards text on the floor. You know, a standard room. And what seems to be another room, a mirrored version of this room, and a strange character identical to Paul's avatar, but with a childlike drawing of a face as its head. And this other character seems to just mirror Paul's movements perfectly until this happens.
What the fuck?
So we've seen evidence before that maybe this game isn't all that it's letting on to be. And now this strange character in-game seemed to be, faking its movement? It was just a mirror image of Paul's movements until it suddenly, seemingly had a mind of its own.
Wait. Hey, sorry, I had to look at that for a moment. In the video. I was a little nervous. The tones, I think this is the same tones, that you might have heard in the beginning. I'm gonna put in the beginning the part where the door opened.
Paul here is referencing this sound, which played when the cellar door in the void opened. And this sound, which played on the other side of the room just before this mirror character seemingly got sentience.
And also the way the guy on the other side was moving for a moment. I'm gonna ask for your comment later on that. So I was looking around here. So this is backwards. It says, do you remember being born? And this just says quitter's room. So interestingly, I'm on the reverse side here. Yeah, okay, so moving on.
Paul explores this whole area a little more, and after seemingly reaching the end, Paul finds himself back up on this plane.
And I'm back up here again.
And is once again surrounded by nothing.
This again. Well, okay, I'm not gonna do that right now. Alright, so I'm gonna stop this now, actually.
And that is how we end Petscop 2. At the start of Petscop 3, Paul heads back down into this cellar area and explores around some more, coming across these words embossed into the wall behind him. Which he remarks is
interesting.
And that's a very interesting phrase. Good grief and alas. And it may sound familiar if you happen to be a fan of Dr. Seuss, who wasn't even a real doctor, by the way, but that's besides the point. There is a short story by Dr. Seuss called Daisy Head Maisie, with the quote,
"Good grief and alas, to think this is happening right here in my class."
And Daisy Head Maisie is about a girl in school who one day suddenly starts growing a daisy out of her head. She is so embarrassed and distraught by this, as the other kids are, teasing her about it, and as the daisy starts to wilt and essentially die, so does Maisie. It is, in some way, connected to her. She eventually runs away as she feels abandoned by everyone, and she proclaims that
I can never go home. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me.
the daisy then proceeds to pluck itself.
They love her not. They love her. They love her not.
In the classic fashion of they love me not, with every odd petal being they love me, and every even petal they love me not, until In the cartoon, it ends on an odd petal, "They love me," but that isn't what happens in Petscop. This scene and the quote are very obviously a direct reference to the short story, and seem to hint that Care had possibly run away, was ashamed or embarrassed by her appearance, or by something that happened to her, and now believed, truly, that nobody loved her. And there are some dark themes starting to take shape here. That is to say nothing about the implications here about deflowering, but that is something we won't be covering on YouTube. Paul continues through to the next area, in which he discovers what seems to be a building of sorts, with a rotating deposit box built into the side of it.
What's that? Do I,
Paul then explores inside the building and finds nothing, except this prompt on a drawing board or easel with, honestly, the very same response I would have to seeing something like this.
What? Oh. Okay.
He then proceeds to build a face, choosing between each eye, each eyebrow, and a nose and a mouth, and suddenly, the building starts to shake. Eventually, Paul figures out the puzzle by just waiting.
Yeah, it turned out I just had to wait, but I had to wait a while. So this is cleared out, I guess. So what's in here?
And then makes his way through into the newly unlocked area, which is a bedroom. A child's bedroom by the looks of it, complete with an actual child sitting on the bed, and also 3 objects. An 8-ball, a lamp, and a small model car placed onto a table. There's also, of note, stars, bears, and game controllers on the carpet, and the face we entered earlier on the cupboard.
Okay.
Paul doesn't find anything else of interest, so he decides to exit the room and try another face.
So I just did it again. I put in another one of these, and I just let it go, and the room rumbles for a while, but then it just stops, kind of abruptly. So what do we have here now?
And the new face he entered has led to the creation of a new room. This new room has circles, clowns, and flowers on the carpet, and a Rubik's Cube and a Pez dispenser on the table.
Yeah, so it seems like I put in one of these faces, and it gives me a room with I guess that's a kid sitting on the bed and like a different pattern on the floor and the walls and the thing here. So it seems like there are many combinations of these faces. So if I were to guess, these rooms are, because there's not much variation between these rooms, they're probably generated in some way. So I'll try a few more. Every time I put in one of these, I have to wait for like 10 minutes. So I'm not going to try too many of them. Here's another one.
Paul generates a few more rooms and once again finds little variations, different carpets, different colors, different objects, but nothing super noteworthy until this happens.
So anything look familiar here? Yeah, so probably we're supposed to try these out, put in these faces and see what we get. So start with this one. So this is the room corresponding to the face on the grave stone.
Paul enters the room seemingly of Michael Hammond and finds no Mike for obvious reasons, but also two noteworthy objects on the table. A pair of tweezers and... wait, doesn't this object look familiar? The object we encountered earlier that told us to keep watching the windmill seems to be the same object as the one on Mike's table, and it also seems to be the same as these drawings pinned up to this wall of the same building, which begs the question. What the hell is this object? Why was it answering questions? Why is it in Mike's room? And, a little more strangely, what's the significance of these tweezers?
Nothing to see here. The bed's empty.
Paul then tries Care's face, the one above the shed, and it curiously has no eyebrows.
Here's the other room.
And Care's room is a little dull. All the other rooms had colour, purple, green, blue, but Care's room is grey, empty, lifeless, even more lifeless than Mike's if that's possible. And once again we see this same object, as well as some crayons on the table and one other thing, a note on the back wall. Now, there is a lot to break down in these next few messages, so we'll do them bit by bit now and fully break them down a little later on. Your wife says Care isn't growing eyebrows, and keep in mind the information we get from this. Care is once again colored yellow, which makes sense, but there's now this wife of whoever the note is addressing, and her quote is in blue. Oh, and Care isn't growing eyebrows for some reason, which is probably why the face on the shed wasn't drawn with eyebrows. You say, that's a puzzle. Once again, this you refers to whoever the note is intended for, and this you is denoted by the color green. You're secretly very excited to hear this news. You're in the bathtub thinking about her. I have a guess at which child you'll pick next. Which, yeah, this got disturbing real quick. When you find her room, the passage to my right will lead to her, which we'll touch on that line a little later. She'll appear from the darkness, limping, and I'll shoot her in the head.
What am I reading?
Tiara says young people can be psychologically damaged beyond rebirthing. And again, note that Tiara and her quote are both tinted in purple. Also, what is rebirthing and why is it psychologically damaging to young people? A young person walks into your school building. They walk in with you. You're holding their hands. They come out crying into their hands because nobody will love them. Not ever again. Which sounds familiar to Nobody Loves Me, NLM, and crying into their hands, just like Care NLM seems to be doing. And the next text, Nobody Loves Me, all in yellow, seems to basically confirm that this note is in fact referencing Care. And the last message reads, "They wander the new maker plane." So there was, as I said, a lot of information in those few messages.
I'm not sure what to say about that.
We learned that this note was addressed to a you, and that this you is denoted by the color green. We know that he, or it can be a she, but they have a wife, so statistically it's a he, but his wife is denoted by the color blue. And we learn that Care is perhaps their child, or perhaps a child that they know very well, you know, a student, a niece, etc. And that she, for some reason, isn't growing eyebrows. And that this man says sarcastically, you know, that's very strange, that's a puzzle, but is really secretly excited about the fact that she isn't growing eyebrows, and is thinking about her in the bathtub. Yeah. Then there seems to be a strange non sequitur, where, and this happens a lot in this series, where a character or note will go from saying something quite logical to something just completely unconnected and, you know, nonsensical. But it then says, when you find her room, the passage to my right will lead to her. She'll appear from the darkness, limping, and I'll shoot her in the head.
What am I reading?
Like, what does any of that even mean? Is it literal? Is it figurative? Is it a reference to real life? Is it referencing Care at this point? Or someone else entirely? And speaking of non sequiturs, we're then introduced to Tiara, who is clearly denoted by the color purple, but who is she? Why is she introduced here? What is rebirthing? And finally, a young person walks into your school. This you, we can assume, refers to the man in green from earlier, and the young person likely refers to Care, due to the yellow quote a little later on. And so this green man walks into this school with Care, and then she walks out crying into her hands, saying that nobody will ever love her, and now she wanders the New Maker plane. So is this the New Maker plane? I mean, it sure seems like it is, which begs the obvious question, what is a New Maker? Well, to explain that, we need to go back to a few clues we touched on a little earlier in the video, in what we'll call the Quitter's Room. It had on the wall a note that read, "Do you remember being born?" So we have this idea of remembering being born, of rebirthing, of New Maker, of Tiara, of a Quitter's Room. And if we follow all of these clues, they lead to a real life case of rebirthing, essentially, where, and I will warn you that this case is horrific, so continue at your own peril. But this was the case of Candice Tiara Elmore, a 10-year-old girl who was rescued by social services after growing up in an abusive home, and she was later adopted by a woman named Jean Elizabeth Newmaker, and they changed Tiara's name to Candice Elizabeth Newmaker. Now, once again, you have been warned, but after the adoptive mother thought that Tiara wasn't fitting in or connecting with her new family, so to speak, she decided to go through with something called rebirthing.
Then say it like you mean it.
No, Neil.
No, Neil, what? Oh, is this the kind of stuff that you do all the time, huh? I forgot. I don't know. Play stupid. Poor little Stevie.
And in this rebirthing, the adoptive mother and some unlicensed at the time psychologists brought Tiara in, wrapped her in a sheet, and covered her with blankets and pillows, and then proceeded to put all of their weight on top of her, all 4 adults in the room. And they told her that she had to crawl and force her way out of this, blanket womb in order to be reborn. And this was a way of forcing her to struggle, like a butterfly in a cocoon or something, where after it goes through the hard work of breaking out, it feels accomplished, it has this new lease on life. But that is not what happened, not even close. She told them from underneath these covers that she was having trouble. She struggled and begged and pleaded, saying she couldn't breathe, she couldn't move, that she was losing consciousness, and she even ended up vomiting, and repeatedly told them to let her out and said that she was dying. And 40 minutes into this session, they asked Tiara if she even wanted to be reborn, and she softly said no. This no would be the last words that she would ever speak. And then, after a total of 70 minutes, 30 of which she was completely unresponsive, after 70 minutes of yelling at her, of insulting her, of telling her she may as well just give up, that she was a quitter, that she was useless, saying, yeah, stay in there, I hope you die, I hope you never make it out. After 70 minutes of this, they finally got up, they unwrapped the cover, and they found Tiara blue and unresponsive, with her being declared dead the next day. It is one of the most heartbreaking cases I've ever read about or covered, and what's even worse is that these absolute monsters who did this to Tiara only served 7 years in prison. I don't know how that's even possible. But this does, in-game, give us a link between Tiara, between the Quitter's Room, rebirthing, remembering being born, etc. So, is this girl this other character? Is this Tiara? We shall see. But it should be noted that this isn't the actual Tiara. Like, the creator of the series Petscop has stated explicitly that he used these references to Tiara, to New Maker, and rebirthing, etc. to paint kind of a scene, to paint the theme of child neglect and abuse, but that Tiara Newmaker, the actual girl, doesn't exist in Petscop. It's just like Daisyhead Maisie, the Dr. Seuss character, doesn't actually exist in the game, but rather it's just an analogy. But there is in-game a character named Tiara. She's just not this little girl, but she is denoted by the color purple, and she may or may not be the character here in the mirrored room. So I told you there was a lot to explore in just this one note.
I'm not sure what to say about that, but I'm wondering now. Because the note, remember the note that came with this game? It said, for you. It was for you. And this note is referring to the player. It's saying you. And I was already thinking this, but it seems like it's possible. This game was made for... Well, this part of the game was made for somebody to see. It just seems like it was intended for somebody. Not me, certainly. We're still not done, because we still have whatever's over here. Or not.
And that ends Petscop 3. With Petscop 4, one of the shortest videos in the series, Paul starts off by stating,
So if you remember what I was trying to explain yesterday, and failed to explain, I'm just gonna demonstrate that to you now.
this video number 4 directly follows number 3 in terms of upload order, yet we never got this explanation.
So I found this yesterday. And the way I understand this is... So, we're upstairs right now. You just saw me walk up some stairs. So, if you were to imagine what would be exactly below where I'm standing right now, and I worked it out, it's roughly the area where you have the big screen with the windmill.
Here, Paul is referencing the room we visited earlier, with the strange object and the view of the windmill. What he's implying is that we are directly above that room right now.
And so I think, this I think is a camera, and if I walk...
But, obviously,
direction.
the windmill is now no longer here.
This is roughly where the windmill would be. Why there isn't actually a windmill here, I don't know. It looks sort of like a placeholder for it. But yeah, I think my understanding is correct. It's just, I'm missing something. Okay, that's it.
And that ends Petscop 4.
Alright, so I spent a while with this, just asking as many questions as I could think of. Mostly like short 3-word things.
Paul asks the object a ton of questions that are all listed in the video description of Petscop 5. But he asks the object a lot, and most of them result in either no answer, or as he points out, the default answer, which is I don't know. But there are 4 questions that he asks that result in some very interesting answers.
And I'm gonna go through each of those 4 now.
When asked, who is Tiara? The object responds, Petscop Kid, very smart. Who am I? Results in the answer, Newmaker, which is very interesting. And where am I? Results in the answer, under the Newmaker plane. Alright, so I guess that dark green void area is the Newmaker plane, and this underground area is, yeah, under the Newmaker plane. And then, on his last question, this happens.
And And then I asked, who are you?
The object that was once red now suddenly turns pink.
I don't know why that just happened.
Which has apparently never happened before, according at least to Paul's reaction. The text box also goes from red to pink, and Paul asks it the question that he had asked it before, and receives no response.
I think it broke. Yeah, I don't think that even just registered at all.
Until this happens.
Or, okay. So that's not what it said before when I put in that question. Did not look anything like that.
So, once again, it seems we have another instance of something or someone in-game having a mind of its own, just like the girl's movements in the quitter's room. The red object's answers seem to be very cookie-cutter. They provided either a standard answer or simply returned no answer. But when the object turns pink, the instruction to turn off PlayStation seems very strange and out of place for a standard video game.
Okay. What do I ask now?
Paul asks a fairly logical question in response to the object's answer, that just being, why?
Okay.
And nothing happens for a while.
Oh boy.
In fact, quite a long while. Until the object responds.
Yeah, I don't... What the fuck? This fucking game. This game. Okay, alright, what do I...
And just as Paul is about to ask another question, the text box as well as the object turn back to red.
And it switched back again. I think it just... Okay.
And it should be pointed out, if you haven't already noticed it, that when the red object responds, its answers seem quite quick, they're quite automatic, they seem to take the same length of time regardless of how long the answer is. Whereas when the pink object answers, they seem to take a lot longer depending on the length of the answer. Almost as if these answers aren't stored automatically in the game, and almost as if they're being written out or typed out in real time. So Paul decides to ask the question he had originally asked before the object turned pink.
I don't... So if I put in, what was it? If I put in who are you again, is that gonna... Let me see what happens when I put that in. Again. Yeah, so that's what it said originally when I put it in.
So we've learnt a few things here. One, that this object is called or referred to as tool, and this big tool is probably a reference to the drawings and to the object in Mike's room. They're all this same tool. We learned that there are different colors of tool for some reason. The blue tool in the drawings, the red tool here, the pink tool, and we learn of a person named Marvin, more on that later, who picks up the tool and hurts whoever this person is behind pink tool whenever the PlayStation is on, which is very concerning.
So I guess I'm gonna wait for that to happen again. But I guess I'm gonna end the video now, though.
So, after Paul ends the video, he has a little clip at the end where he asks Red Tool, remember being born? To which it responds, I'm not Tiara, which obviously just further cements the connection between rebirthing, being born, and Tiara. And just before we head into Petscop 6, if you aren't already subscribed, please do consider subscribing. I'm willing to bribe you with a Jaffa cake if you subscribe, but I don't have that many left, so first come, first serve. And we are trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which, if I have to buy 5,000 packs of Jaffa cakes to make it happen, God help me, I will. But something to note, Petscop 5 is the only video so far, besides Petscop 1, with a unique description. The first line is super interesting to start. Hello folks, I guess this is for all of you now. Meaning Paul was previously just posting for 1 or 2 people maybe, and after Petscop 5 it is now for all of you? And does he mean all of you as in us, or is this intended for another group of people? At this point, we're not entirely sure. There are then, of course, the lists of questions and answers from the video, but right at the bottom, it says, when the color changed, we were able to ask 2 questions. We were able. As in, not just Paul. But Paul seemed to be alone in the video. He didn't seem to be talking to anyone or on the phone, so who exactly we refers to is, at this point, a complete mystery. Petscop 6 starts off a little differently. We don't get the usual perspective of Paul playing the game, but rather we get a view similar to the one we had earlier of the windmill. There is a dark, ominous sound playing, a time skip forward of almost 3 hours, and then this happens. And if you missed that, here it is again. We see what appears to be feet, or a character walking around near the windmill, but because this figure is a shadow monster man, let's say, it completely blends into the black background. He seemingly goes into the windmill, and then, after a while, the rotation of the windmill reverses. He emerges, and quite honestly comes uncomfortably close to the camera. Like, seriously dude, personal space. Then the camera rotates and fades into nothing. We see this dark figure moving around again, and then this strange image pops up for a few seconds, which we'll explore later. And suddenly, the Shadow Man is there in the plane, and he starts somehow generating these word blocks. So this Shadow Man has turned the camera around for us to look at him, and then starts building out this message, "Where is my house?" He then proceeds to build what is assumedly his house, a green wooden building, which, where have we seen that house before? And where have we seen the color green before? He then asks, where is the school? While at the same time an object appears, a gift on a stick or a pole, which then transforms somehow into Tonith. More on that in a bit. He asks, where is the school? And then builds out seemingly a representation of the school. Then says, I will follow. And the camera rotates back round to the windmill. and after a short while, this happens. The windmill vanishes into thin air.
That's kind of fun, actually. Going through a 4-hour video and noticing that on one half of the video, the windmill's going in one direction, and in the other half, it's going in the other direction. And pinpointing where the change occurred, and the fuck is this?
It should be noted here that although Paul is seemingly surprised or shocked at something here, there doesn't seem to be anything he's seeing here that he hasn't seen in episode 4. So what exactly he's exclaiming at here is not at all clear.
That's neat.
Paul heads up to the New Maker plane and explains how he had seen this camera before, but it was never red, and it was only sometimes at this height.
Well, that's red now. Oh, yeah, I was gonna mention this actually in another video. I've come up here before and seen it. I've seen the camera at this height before. I don't know what causes it to happen, but sometimes I just come up here and it's at this height. It makes sense in this case, I think, because the character was like right up at the camera here. And it seemed to be like at this level.
Paul goes behind the camera, seemingly to where it was rotated to by the Shadow Monster Man.
Well, this is still here. Oh my god.
And finds this man's messages still here along with Toneth.
Nothing else. Okay.
He then takes a look at his newly caught pet, and also note the new message in the menu. Have you found anything weird lately? There is much to find in this place. It is here that we see the description for Toneth, who, if you'll remember, was the only pet that we couldn't see in Even Care. And the description says, enter a description here, which, yeah, followed by 3 hyphens, followed by seemingly an actual description. A bird. I think I forgot what birds look like. Funny, stupid blob monster, says Mike. That's what it is. Painter. Painting puzzle. Catch Randis first? Question mark? And then we get this.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I was the only one who still wanted to put him down. What have I just walked into?
Paul, I ask myself that question every single minute with this series. But let's recap on what we just saw and what we just learned. First, we know that Toneth wasn't originally in the finished game, you know, in Even Care, which might make sense given that his description was enter a description here. It seems like a placeholder for an unfinished asset. Next, the line, a bird. I think I forgot what birds look like. And the next one, funny, stupid blob monster, says Mike. Now these seem to imply that someone, maybe Mike, maybe whoever created this game, has forgotten what birds look like for some reason, and that Mike calls Toneth a funny, stupid blob monster, because he, you know, can't compare it to a bird. And this implies that Mike has either played this game, or has had some hand in either making it, or designing it, or providing feedback for it sometime before his death. The next line implies that maybe Tonith is a painter, and that perhaps you'd need to complete some sort of painting puzzle in order to capture him. And perhaps you'd also need to capture Tonith's friend, Randis, first. And then we get this madness. Tonith has a broken leg for some reason, as we can see in his picture. Then the message starts to get a bit disjointed. I already hung him on a wall, too late to take it back. Hung who on a wall? Tonith? Or someone else? There's mention of a dog, of a car hitting the dog. The author of this message, whoever it is, thinking at least it will be over soon, you know, the suffering, etc. But no, the dog survives, and yet this person, whoever it is, still wanting to put the dog down. It then goes on to say that a dog is an innocent, but the message is seemingly cut off by the bottom of the page. And whose dog was this? Why does Tonith have a broken leg? Is Tonith a reference to the dog? Then it says, when the dog wags its tail, and it, repeating the word it, which might be a sign of just manic typing, when it appears happy, it's not real. Now, this can be seen of as quite a cynical statement, saying that when this dog is happy and, you know, wagging its tail, it's not really happy. It's just faking it or something, which could be a reflection of the author themselves, perhaps feeling this way, feeling depressed, sad, angry, etc., and faking a smile or faking being normal to other people, but really deep down, it not being real, and then of course projecting it onto this dog. And the fact that the text goes off the screen is another sign of just manic typing, not bothering to plan or segment messages to fit into the box, as we have seen with every text box so far. The description says, I guess that's Tonith then, which, yeah, that's Tonith. And then it repeats Tonith like a million times, ending with the end. It's yucky outside. Which, again, manic typing, not really fit for a description in a video game. And the very end with it's yucky outside might imply someone who hates the outside world, hates people, hates society, hates life even, or is just really down, really sad. And just to add to that, this could be a quote from Mike, as yucky tends to be quite an immature word that you might expect a kid to use. So we have an author who is cynical, angry, depressed, putting on a mask for the world, and Mike, who describes this as a funny, stupid blob monster, has forgotten what birds look like and thinks the outside world is yucky. So a ton of info in just this short description.
Yeah, okay.
Paul then navigates around the pet menu a little bit, and suddenly finds this.
Okay, so I actually... This is new to me. I haven't seen this. Yeah, so I tried going down here before, but I think actually that was before I even put in the code. So I just discovered this just now.
It would seem that for some unknown, possibly dark reason, Care and her various forms are all listed in the pet menu and might potentially be able to be caught, which is an oddly worrisome thought. We also notice this fourth space for a pet with no image or silhouette.
Yeah, so I didn't imagine you could catch this. I mean, I walked into it. Nothing happened. Discovering a lot of interesting things. I meant to talk about this, because this doesn't do anything, right? This menu option, nothing happens. I'm guessing at some point you could name your pets. Right? And this was like suggestions or something. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, showing that that doesn't do anything. Alright.
Paul then returns to the red camera, where the windmill is, once again, missing. He then returns to the red tool and asks it, specifically, the questions that the Shadow Monster Man displayed to us earlier. To the question, where is my house? The red tool responds, you'll never go home. And to the question, where is the school? The red tool responds, you can't go back in time. Both a little cryptic and or dark, and we can start to wonder at this point if this game or these messages were even meant for Paul, or if they're meant for someone else entirely.
This game is trying very hard to make it seem like there's an entity in it. Like a ghost or an AI trying to communicate with me. It's interesting, but you know, the way you know that there's a ghost in a game trying to communicate with you is if it comes out, if it stops being distant, and it comes out and you can have a real-time back and forth with it. And it stops being so one way. Like I leave my PlayStation and it comes out and does this whole pre-recorded thing. And well, the closest thing that's happened to that is last video. It actually answers my questions, but it only responded to 2 of my questions, and the first question I asked, I didn't even answer that question. So no obvious interactivity happening. And it answered the second question, but that could have been a coincidence. Yeah. So not entirely convincing yet.
So, from the various strange interactions Paul has had or witnessed in this game, it seems he's starting to think possibly that there is a ghost or a ghoul or an AI in the game somehow, or rather that the game is trying to make him think that there is. But clearly Paul isn't super convinced of this, and thinks that these occurrences might just be somehow pre-recorded actions or segments of these characters or of this gameplay.
But, I'm looking forward to what I might see next. It's very interesting, this game, because you can walk around and something will just happen, Because I created a new file, and I tried to be scientific about it. I went and did all the same things that I did this time, and the same things did not happen. None of the things happened. None of the oddities occurred. Like the thing in the mirror room, for example. So there's a bit of randomness in it, and it's interesting how it doesn't seem to really care if you see everything, I guess. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Petscop 7 starts off a little slow, with Paul walking around the quitter's room, and as before, the girl in the mirrored room, well, mirrors him. He then stops moving, and by the sounds of it, ruffles through some pages. Which are perhaps instructions, perhaps notes, perhaps a guide of some kind. And then, as he's reading them, this happens.
Something's happening. Oh, hi there.
There now seems to be, after the appearance of Tiara and the tune, a crudely written message on the note on the wall.
Okay.
That simply says, "Come here." The video then jumps forward to Paul walking up to the red tool, and curiously, It is already giving an answer to a question that Paul never asked, except this is not the red tool giving this answer, it is the pink tool. I love you, new maker. Please show Marvin where his house is. And there's that theme of love again, that we got from Daisy Head Maisie. So, we are new maker, apparently, according to red tool's answer earlier. And now pink tool is, again without being prompted by a question, asking us to show Marvin where his house is. So is this guy the shadow monster man? Is that Marvin? He was asking earlier into the camera that is apparently sticking out of the ground above this area where his house was. And now someone is asking us to show him where his house is. So I think we can safely assume that this guy is Marvin. The same Marvin who apparently picks up tool and hurts someone when the PlayStation is on. Why does he do this? And why is he looking for his house and for the school? Is this the same person as the you that some previous notes were addressed to? The man with the wife who thought about care in the bathtub, as those notes also mentioned a school.
So we might know who Marvin is now. Oh, I need to be quick about this, actually. Because it could turn red again. So I'm going to ask, who are you? Which I feel like we know at this point, but good to confirm.
So again, the pink tool, or whatever or whoever is behind it, tells Paul to go there, and he will follow you, meaning Marvin.
He's talking about the house again.
And this now confirms that Marvin has a daughter and that she is at the house. And can I just say that I absolutely love Paul's reaction here.
It's interesting, but it is not an answer to my question. Not at all.
Paul then asks the pink tool, while he still can, another question. One that we've seen before in the quitter's room. And the video cuts here, so presumably Paul had to wait a while for this answer, but when the video resumes we get this answer, which seems like there's something missing here.
Machine beyond school basement stairway.
Because it doesn't seem like an actual answer to Paul's question. It actually seems to be like part 2 of an answer.
Also not an answer to my question. Well.
Paul then makes his way back to the child library with the bedrooms, and goes to the weird chute deposit thingy out front, then goes to his menu, specifically his pets menu, and realizes that when he's near this drop box, his description option on each pet changes to a drop option. And when Paul tries to drop a pet in here, the prompt says the child library only accepts people, which, okay, that's a little weird.
Okay, well I guess I'm kind of an idiot. I wouldn't have tried that. I guess these are people, right? There's my work. Okay, so that's another thing.
Paul chooses a new face on the easel, and then makes his way into the generated room.
Anything out of the ordinary here? What's on the floor? Looks like a gift box, and stars, and something else. So this, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, this is Mike's face, but without the eyebrows. And why am I doing that? Well, because eyebrows seem to be important. And that's really it. But nothing seems to have actually... It seems like it's just just regular room, right? Yeah, okay. I don't know. Guess that's it. Alright, I have one more thing to try, though. one is Care with Eyebrows.
Here we see in this room, Care's room, or Care with Eyebrows, that on the table are some letter blocks, similar to those used and spawned by Marvin earlier, and this. Paul is clearly startled by whatever he sees here. He has long moments of silence, he stumbles over his words, he stutters. Whatever he is looking at is clearly bothering him.
So this is Care with Eyebrows. I put Mike's eyebrows on her. I could have put other eyebrows on her, but I didn't. I put Mike's on her. I don't know if this... I can't tell. I can't tell if it recognized it or not. Because everything looks like any other room. Except it puts this here. Except it puts this. I don't know, maybe that's just something that it puts in any room.
And right at the end of Petscop 7, we see that the game is not censoring whatever this item is, but rather the videos are being censored after they've been made by we don't know who. There's that use of we again. So if it is Paul who's censoring this video and, writing the descriptions, then it's not just Paul. It's at least multiple people or an entire group. They say they've had to censor a bunch of things in these videos, but they can't say why. And they kindly let us know what other things they might be censoring in the future. A big present with a sticker on it, something on a wall in a black house, and something written on a chalkboard. So definitely keep an eye out for those. Petscop 8 starts us off in an area that Paul previously explored. This road. And in the earlier video, Paul didn't seem to notice the car drive by, or make any mention of it. But here, Paul notices the cars, and tries to get them to hit him, but every time he stands in the road, the cars stop. And after a bit of this, suddenly, for the first time in-game, this happens.
What? What?
He chases Marvin for a while before being brought to a picture that we looked at earlier, of the school that Marvin crudely drew out in the Newmaker Plain. Marvin then seemingly does circles around Paul and runs down to the picture of Marvin's house.
This is Marvin, right?
And then Marvin runs down again.
This is Marvin.
And runs straight into a brick wall.
I think you're confused, Marvin.
And as always, I live for Paul's comments.
Don't think you know. I don't think you get what you're doing.
Then, after a while of this, Marvin runs straight up and disappears, almost like he's climbing an invisible staircase. And Paul also assumes that he's climbed a staircase of some kind, and so goes up to the Newmaker Plain and just runs around for ages. He then sensibly eventually returns down, and he seems to be in a conversation with someone about where Marvin went.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's not here now. There's not even a passageway or anything. Can you remember when you saw this? Well, it could have changed between then and 2004. After 2004, my mom had it reportedly.
He says the passageway isn't here anymore. The person he's speaking to seems to remember something here, but Paul says that the game might have changed between whenever they played it and 2004, because after 2004, Paul's mum had the game. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but this conversation actually reveals a lot. Firstly, we find out that other people have played this game, at least one of which Paul is currently in contact with, and they played it before 2004. And we know that Mike had at least seen some of the assets in this game before or around 1995. But we don't currently know in-game what year it is. And we find out that somehow, for some reason, the game is changing, or has been changed over the years, as the person Paul is speaking to seems to remember something here, but obviously when Paul is playing now, there is clearly just a solid wall.
Well, okay. Thanks.
And then Petscop 9 begins. And Petscop 9 is one of the more unique videos in this series, as it showcases for the first time the demo mode. The character seems to walk in through the top door of Evencare, you know, the one that was shut, and interestingly enough, the main door is actually shut in this demo. So, you know when you're playing a game and you just wait on the start screen and then after a while a demo of the game plays? That is seemingly what happens in this video. But the character makes their way through the home and up to the music room. It steps on the little treadmill thing that Paul used to catch Pen. And it just starts treading away. And then it just stands there. For quite a while. And then it completes the last 3. And that's the end of the demo. So, pretty uneventful, right? Except no. You're really telling me you don't recognize this pattern anywhere? 13 beats. Followed by a long pause. Finally, followed by 3 final ticks. So, what the hell does this even mean? A demo version of the game had the exact same movements that Paul made in episode 2, and this has honestly opened up a range of possibilities. Firstly, who made these movements first? Did Paul pluck the flower and then the demo somehow copied his timings? Did the demo happen first and is somehow connected to Paul and his timings? Or is something else happening here entirely? And why or how would he copy the demo, or would the demo copy him? It's not like the demo is a video of him just plucking the flower. Like, it's another character in another room in seemingly another version of the game doing another action, just with the exact timings that Paul had. And we will explore this fully later later on, but it is a very interesting occurrence and definitely something to keep an eye out for moving forward. Paul explores the shed and all that once more, and then Paul walks downstairs, and when he gets to the bottom, instead of proceeding, he turns the right and becomes a shadow monster man. And this seems like an actual genuine glitch you might find in a video game, which is pretty cool. It's probably to do with the game darkening your sprite to give the illusion of going downstairs, but then accidentally leaving a gap on the side of the bottom of the stairs, and so it allows the player to leave that area without recoloring or rebrightening the sprite. Pretty cool. But Paul messes around with this for a while. He tries to do it in the same place but opposite side. He tries in another stairway. He walks around the camera area. And when he heads north, he sees for the first time in person the windmill. It's not the zoomed out camera view or the, non-existent view. It's the actual physical windmill. So Paul goes round to the back of the windmill, enters in through the unseen door, and finds this. And let's just take a moment to take everything in. We have the windmill, and inside we have moving gears. Chugging along, we have the head and partial body of this female character. We have another unique face, and this one, take note, has no eyebrows. And we also have another tool, this time a white tool. Paul interacts with the tool, and it's seemingly picked up and used on this girl, giving Paul 50 points and making the Windmill Girl disappear. So, was she killed? Was she teleported? Did she just disappear or go missing? At this stage, we don't really know. Paul then transforms back to normal, Paul mode, and lo and behold, the windmill is no longer visible. So it seems like you can only actually view it or visit it when you're in the Shadow Monster Man mode, which is a very interesting point which we will touch on later in the theory section. Now, back at the child library, Paul enters in the face of, we'll call her the Windmill Girl for now, who, as I said earlier, notably doesn't have any eyebrows. And the text says, "You found her," which is also interesting. This is the Windmill Girl's room.
Okay.
There is, on the table, a windmill, and there's that tool again. And eerily enough, the carpet contains gears, just like the gears we found this girl spinning in within the windmill. Also, I do want to point out the stark similarities between this room and Care's room. Both faces had no eyebrows. Both rooms are almost completely devoid of color. They both have, as an item on their tables, this red tool, and, as you might have seen by now, both have a note pinned to the wall. Oh, and this room has a creepy copy of us just standing there reading the note, but we'll touch on him in just a few minutes. So, once again, we have a note on a wall addressed to you, who we deduced earlier was very likely Marvin. And I'll let the messages play out and we'll recap them in just a second. So we find out that this author, whoever it is, has been looking through Marvin's things. They say they found a picture of Marvin from 1977, standing in front of an old windmill with his friend. And it was a bad idea, and Marvin and his friend just disappeared into thin air. And a girl in an old windmill, bad idea. Where have we seen something like this before? The girl's sister was apparently also there, and she took the original photo. Marvin, friend, windmill. And minutes later, took another photo. No windmill, no friend, just Marvin. So the obvious question is, what happened to the girl? And of course, the windmill. Marvin married this girl's sister, the one who took the photos, and years later had a kid. And the Windmill Girl was apparently reborn as Marvin's kid. So again, we have this idea of being reborn or of rebirth. Now, this is all very strange and a little confusing at this moment, but we'll see where this all leads in just a few minutes. The author has apparently brought this up with Marvin's wife, but she won't admit anything, as, you know, she was also there on the day this girl went missing. But whoever this is that is writing this note seems to have found some evidence regarding whatever happened on that day. Whether the friend died or disappeared, she never actually returned with Marvin and her sister. And when the author of this note went to see the windmill themselves to try and find it, it was also missing. And finally, the note is signed off, Raina Newmaker. So we finally get a name for the author of these notes, and seemingly for the creator of this game, Raina, who seems himself, and we'll call him a he at least for now, as Raina is typically a boy's name, but he sees himself as a new maker, which is what Paul was called in an earlier video by both the red and pink tools. And just a quick aside, the name Raina is very interesting. So one of the more famous Rainas in history was a man named Rainer Maria Rilke, an Austrian poet and writer who, very interestingly, was raised as a girl. So he was born as a boy, but his mum, who was still at the time mourning the death of, Raina's younger sister, or older sister, I guess kind of wanted to have her deceased daughter reborn in a way as Raina. She wanted a daughter so badly because of the one that she lost. So when he was a kid, she used to grow his hair out long, dress him up in, dresses, have him play with girls' toys, and just generally try to raise him as a girl. So this isn't a confirmed connection, but it is still a pretty interesting point that ties into everything we've learned so far. So we have Raina, whoever that is, making this video game and leaving notes, seemingly for Marvin, who we can only suppose must have also at some point played this game, and perhaps the game was even made, at least in part, for Marvin, as there don't really seem to be any notes addressed to anyone else, except for this one, but it's not really a note in the same way. And then Paul walks off to the right to a hallway leading out of this bedroom. But wait, what about the creepy character at the start? The clone of us that was reading the note? Well, this is where things start to take a very strange and a somewhat dark turn if they haven't already. If we compare these two scenes, we see that after reading the note, Paul exits in the exact same way, the exact same timing, footsteps, everything. That the clone exited in, except the clone exited before Paul even read the note. So, to quote Paul,
this fucking game.
What happened with the demo earlier, and the petals and the treadmill, might have been a case of the demo somehow recording and repeating the timing of Paul's actions, but this, there is no real explanation for this. Either Paul saw the clone exit and then copied its movements to the T, which is very, very unlikely, or time travel, time loop. Paul is part of the game. Paul is an AI. There are honestly a ton of theories for this one, and not much else in the way of evidence at the moment. So for now, let me know your thoughts on this one, and we'll move on and explore it later. He comes out into what seems to be a paved path, picks up points along the way, and then comes to an open area or a building with 2 gifts on either side of the room. There is a cake in the middle, there is a window through which we can see a bench, a slice of cake, and a yellow pinwheel. Now, it should be noted that from the view of the bench looking in, the candle on the cake says 9, not, P, which is likely referencing the age of the child at this party. He opens the first gift and finds a green key, which just floats and hovers above his head. Then he opens the other gift with a sticker on it, and
What the fuck?
this sensor, in case you missed it, was one of the ones mentioned in the earlier notification. A big present with a sticker on it. It then cuts to some time later,
Weirdness. The camera here.
and Paul has seemingly recovered from whatever he saw inside the gift and is exploring the party room. He heads to the right all the way down but finds nothing. Then he does the same with the left. And here he finds a secret building and inside another gift. He opens the gift, hears the sound of this choir playing in the background. And makes his way back to the Newmaker plane. And what's interesting is, above the door of this building, there is a strange cubular object, which we will touch on in just a few seconds. Paul enters the building and appears in even care. And, does that pattern in the background seem familiar to you? Well, it should. It is the exact same pattern that was on the cube above the entrance we just entered through. And keep an eye out for this, because it will pop up a few more times going forward. Paul seems to be a bit taken back that he's here again in even care, but if you'll notice, this is somewhat similar to the demo that we saw earlier. Paul enters through the top door, the main door is closed, and when he gets round to Amber's room, the setup is similar to how it was in the demo. Both levers up, no Amber, and the right gate is open. And just for reference, this version of even care is called by the Petscop community odd care, just to differentiate it from the original version that Paul played in. So I shall as well call it odd care. Paul makes his way round to the music room, where the count is at 0, and the count on the treadmill seems to be 0 from the actions of the demo that we saw earlier, and there is no visible keyboard as there was in even care. So again, which came first? Did that demo gameplay actually affect Paul's world? Paul steps onto the treadmill and eventually sets the number to 16. Which seems to be the maximum. And then down to -1. And the game crashes. We then resume with Paul still with this green key, going to the shed under which we found Care NLM, and he catches her. Now, a few things here. Firstly, in catching Care, Paul has revealed another one of these cubes, but also the menu message says, "You're in the other place too." Cryptic. Paul then goes into the pet's menu, and finds Care NLM caught. Her description reads, Care NLM escaped from the school's basement and wandered the Newmaker plane for days. To catch her, you had to lie, but it may not be a lie forever. And this, I'm assuming, refers to what we just did in Odd Care. We know the treadmill in some way is connected to Care and to her flower and her petals, and according to Daisy Head Maisie, the petals represented they love me not. Well, when Care ran out of petals, we ended on the count of they love me not. And so by setting the treadmill to -1, Paul is essentially ticking it again, adding one more petal to set it to essentially they love me. And this is what is referenced to as you had to lie, because a flower can't have -1 petals. So it's a lie, but not forever. You're the Newmaker. You can turn Care NLM into Care A and close the loop, which I'll just touch on it briefly here because we'll be going into this more in depth shortly. But the idea of closing the loop or ending the cycle has always been very closely associated with generational abuse. You know, father shouts at his son grows up, becomes a father, then shouts at his son, just like his father did to him, generation after generation, until someone goes through abuse and chooses not to continue the cycle, which that is something to keep in mind in this series. There's also the idea of turning Care NLM, where she believes nobody will ever love her, into Care A, seemingly before any of this trauma happened. And that also ties in with Newmaker and the idea of rebirthing, forgetting your previous life or self. So there are a bunch of themes being introduced here, and they all in some way build upon one another. Paul exits out of the menu and walks up to touch this strange cube. And then something happens. But we don't really see because the next clip seems to be a cut and not a direct transition from touching the cube. So Paul heads back to the child library, equipped with his child, Care NLM, and he successfully deposits her into the library. And the response is a little concerning. He rotates the Dropbox round, and when it comes back, Care is gone. Paul heads into Care's room and does indeed pick her up again, catching her for a second time from her bed. Petscop 10 starts off with Paul walking around Odd Care. He walks in, closes, then opens the right-hand gate, and then opens the left gate. And then goes to exit, and the door closes on him. And since Paul doesn't know how to open doors, he's essentially trapped. The game then crashes and is restarted. And here we see a very odd, if you'll excuse the pun, sight. We see the test file here that Paul mentioned earlier when he was testing out another playthrough to see if the game, did the same stuff every time. We also have Paul's main file, and we have a backup file that Paul made. But both the main file and the backup file are tagged with possible corruption and have this symbol with what many people believe, myself included, stands for panic save, which seems to be an emergency save done by the system just before a crash or freeze happens, which this very likely occurred just when the game crashed in Oddcare. So Paul loads up his save, and finds himself just outside of Oddcare in that strange room with the gift. So he opens up the gift again, enters Oddcare, and makes his way to Amber's room. Where a very minor detail has changed. These cages that Paul opened before the save even took place. Because, you know, the game crashed in Oddcare, he loaded the game back outside of Oddcare, so logically none of the actions he took in Oddcare would have been saved. But strangely, these cages remained open. The video cuts once again, and Paul, upon roaming around this familiar area, discovers that there now exists a path into the left-hand side of the quitter's room. And mirrored once again, this time on the other side, is Tiara. And there seems to be an interesting connection between this world, or this area, and Oddcare. The treadmill seems to be connected to the petals on Care's daisy, and the cages in Amber's room seem to be connected to the entrances on each side of the quitter's room. Oh, and here we have another strange cube. Paul touches, again, this strange cube on this bed, and the video cuts to him in the tool room. He asks the red tool what month is it, and what year is it, which were two questions that the author Rainer, or the deposit box, asked when Paul deposited Care NLM. And to both of these questions, the red tool simply responds, floating red calendar. He then asks the red tool where was the windmill, in relation to something Rainer asked Marvin in the note, and then this happens. And we have no idea what is revealed behind that sensor. Petscop 11 starts off mid-sentence.
Signs along the way that I ignored. Because it would have been a completely ridiculous idea to me. But when I found my room, it made... I was shocked at first, but it made sense. Especially considering where I found the game in the first place. They would be tied in some way to me through you. And I'm trying to think, when was the last time I saw any of you at all? It had to have been like 1999. I was a kid. I was a small kid. Tiny kid. And after that, just, you know. But it would make sense in the timeline.
So we learn a few things here. There were signs along the way that Paul ignored. Signs of what exactly? What realization has Paul come to? It's a realization that at first seemed ridiculous to him. He said he found his room. What room is this? We never see Paul enter his own face into the child library, so what room that he's explored was his? He says it kind of makes sense considering where he found the game in the first place. So maybe he found the game inside his, real life bedroom. We find out that Paul thinks the game is probably in some way tied to him through you, with this you being whoever he's speaking to in the video. He tries to remember the last time he saw this person, or any of you, which sounds like it's a group of friends he's speaking about, or an extended family or something. People you might see maybe once a year, maybe once every few years. And he says the last time he saw them probably was around 1999, when Paul was a small, tiny kid. And after 1999, after he saw you all, something happened. Because he kind of trails off with, after that, well, you know. And that is a lot of information to learn about in just a few seconds. But it does add a lot of depth into what Paul thinks and remembers, and into who exactly he is and has been speaking to about this game. The video then cuts to Paul seemingly aimlessly walking around the Newmaker plane, and then Paul walks around in circles, back and forth.
So it's hard to do this while I'm talking, that's why I'm so quiet right now. So if you're wondering what I'm doing right now, I have a drawing that I could scan and send to you. I just came home and drew this big drawing. And it's still, you still need an explanation on, because the drawing is not very clear, like scribbles really, but you need the visual to understand the explanation, right? So you need both. I'm about 90% sure that this is gonna work. 10% not so sure. But mostly sure. Okay. Wait, I think I did that wrong. Start again, wait.
And somehow spawns a question prompt, similar to the ones at
Holy
Red
shit.
and Pink Tool, except this one is grey.
Holy shit. It worked. I mean, I was 90% sure, but it's still a little shocking that it actually worked. That's very neat. Alright, so the way this works, I'm supposed to pass on this one.
Paul exits the question prompt, and then, nearby, discovers this.
There it is.
A spinning wheel
Okay.
on a spike. Paul runs around this wheel, and as he runs around it, the wheel spins in the opposite direction to the direction that he's running. Until eventually another question prompt is unlocked.
Okay. So this one we wanna... what do we wanna... We wanna ask about the house. We wanna ask where is house?
He asks the prompt where the house is, presumably Marvin's house, as that's the only house we've seen so far, and suddenly the wheel starts spinning.
Okay. So I don't know. I mean, this probably is asking me to go this way, right? Yeah, I think that's what's happening. That's not what I was expecting, actually.
He finds a road, saying it was what he expected,
I
but
guess
not exactly.
A road makes sense, but it's not visually the same thing that I was expecting to see.
Which, that's a little strange, because I personally wasn't really expecting anything. He then finds a sign,
Frozen house. I think we found the house. I don't know what that...
and a house.
We just found the fucking house.
Paul has found the house, finally, and unlocked the door.
The key still works.
But can't enter it.
What? What? Another joke about how I can't open doors. Clockwise, the top is going to the right, and then, you know, the bottom
Now,
is
Paul
going
here
to the
talks
left.
about getting confused often
Right,
with
so it's going to
directions.
say, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, or, you know, you turn this thing to the right. And I mean, I still get confused about that.
Left, right, orientation, etc. And that detail will be important going forward, so just keep it in mind.
Well, we have the door open now, so I mean... okay.
And that is all we have time for. This video is the first of 2 parts exploring this incredibly deep and dark mystery that is Petscop. And in its entirety, it is honestly a monster of a series. So Petscop so far has been quite interesting, and I'm sure you have come up with your own theories on some of these things we've explored and covered, and as always, let me know them in the comments below. But Petscop is a series where there are just so many intricate, fine details, connections, references, and the whole thing is open to so many different interpretations, to different theories that link with other theories that also disprove other theories, and so I don't think there is one solid, definitive theory for this whole thing. You have, for example, the music cues, which were here when the original cellar door opened, here just before this character got there, and also here if you listen closely.
Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, or, you know, you turn this...
Which happens just before the door to the house opens. Is someone or something doing these things? You know, opening the doors, moving this tiara character? And if they are, or even are not, why are these music cues attached to them? Then we have the tools, answers, and questions. The red tool seems fairly straightforward as a way to answer questions in game, but what is the deal behind the pink tool? It seems almost intelligent, erratic, emotional in a way, which is very strange for a standard PlayStation 1 game. What is the deal behind these sensors? You know, these black boxes. What are the items behind them? Who is censoring them and why? And why does Paul seem to react quite strongly to them? Next, how do demos work in this game? They're clearly not the standard demos where they'll just record the, you know, screen gameplay. Somehow this demo has taken Paul's exact inputs and transferred them over to this other gameplay where instead of pressing, say, X to pluck a petal, it presses up to walk on the treadmill. So even the button inputs probably aren't the same. It's just the timing of them, which again seems very advanced for a PlayStation 1 game. And how did Paul open these gates in Oddcare, then have the game crash, and then find them still open? Like, where is this data even being saved if not the save file? What exactly is the deal with kids not growing eyebrows? And the whole no eyebrows thing is often seen as evidence for trauma or stress, or it can also be genetic, but that's a whole nother thing. And speaking of dates, we know it's at least 2004, probably at least 2005, and the thing with the windmill happened in 1977. So that's at least 27 years ago? Why were there tweezers in Mike's room? What exactly do the floor patterns in each room represent? And what is this tool found seemingly all over the place? And why does Marvin pick it up and hurt whoever's on the other end of the pink tool whenever the PlayStation is on? Which room is Paul's room? What is the censored object that Paul found on this table? And why does Marvin want to get back to his house, to the school? What exactly happened there? And what's the connection to Raina, and what else does he know? As I said, in the next video we explore the rest of Petscop in its entirety and dive deep into different theories, different possibilities, clues and details revealed in the videos and episodes, and investigate and test a bunch of popular theories as well as a few really niche fringe ones. And honestly, in my opinion, it will be a very fun video. But as I said, all of that is to come, and I hope you are all having a lovely spooky season, a lovely day, week, month, year, decade, century. Okay, I'm going too far now. And as always, thanks for watching.